We're going to continue a discussion about the Halacha process and the Shulchan Aruch. What I stated was the Shulchan Aruch is not really a code the way you would talk about a code of laws. It is actually statements of judicial determination. Rav Yosef Karo stated his conclusion in law on a variety of issues because he basically looked at the spectrum of opinion and said this is a halacha. He had to make a judgment. And then he wrote down his judgment in the Shulchan Aruch. And then the Ramah said, listen, I have other judgments, and so forth. The fact is the nature of halacha, every code that we have, Rambam, they're all really judicial. They're really judicial. They are statements of judgments of individuals on what Jewish law says. Okay? Looking at sources, looking at the Gemaras, looking at other statements, and so forth and so forth. Yeah, some statements are pure non-judicial statements, such as, don't eat pork. But most times, what you find, or a lot of times, what you find is a halachic statement is really a judicial determination written down in a statement. And then the question exists is how much weight does this judicial statement have into the future? The point being that really, let's say theoretically, the way halacha should work is that there is a knowledge of all the issues and all the concepts, and then there's an application of all those issues and all the concepts to a specific situation. So when the Shulchan Aruch makes a law, what Rav Yosef Karo really did, we're just looking at Rav Yosef Karo right now, he was saying, here's a law. He's saying, given the facts as I understand them, okay, and my knowledge of the sources and the way I will paskin from those knowledge of the sources, I'm going to yield the following conclusion. Okay? And that really is going to be the statement of halacha. The Ramah will say something different, the Shach will say something different, Taz will say something different. Okay, and then you'll have a and then what we mean by working within the Shulchan Aruch means that we work within a certain parameter of concepts that sort of were somehow integrated into what we call the world of the Shulchan Aruch. So some Rishon statement, that may have existed in 1200, but was not incorporated anywhere in the corpus material that surrounds the Shulchan Aruch. There'll be limitations and hesitations on pulling out that Rishon and applying that Rishon to halacha. But within the world of the Shulchan Aruch and the various commentators on the Shulchan Aruch, there is a process in terms of determining halacha within these confines, within the confines of this spectrum, and the various different codes, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the Aruch HaShulchan, Chabura is not really a code, but a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. These people all paskin within these parameters. But let me try and give an example of what I mean by the facts meeting a case. Okay? So here's an example. There's a question I just saw on the internet concerning a woman singing over the internet, and whether you can say a bracha while you're hearing while a woman is singing over the internet. It would be a similar type question in terms of radio, similar type question in terms of television. Television would be more of a question because you actually can see the woman, and the internet you can see the woman. But the point is, there's a concept of kol isha, And there's concepts of whether you can say a bracha if you hear. Now, there's concepts of listening to Kol Isha. That's one concept. There's a concept of saying a bracha with Kol Isha. Okay? But the point is let's even deal with just the question of Kol Isha, about a woman singing, is whether a man can hear a woman singing. Okay? So the truth is you have a statement in the Gemara Brachas that says Kol Isha erva, that a woman singing is an erva. And you can't, and that really comes down to an erva. You can't do a bracha in front of an erva. That's really the first level of that idea. And then it's an issue of whether you should look at an erva or hear an erva in this case or whatever. Now the point is that what happens when that is put through the halacha grinder and comes up to a conclusion. So the thing you'll find in Shulchan Aruch is clearly that you can't hear a woman singing. Okay? The question that exists now, though, is what about nowadays hearing a woman over the radio? Is that hearing a woman singing? Okay? So the first question that exists is whether the voice that you hear over the radio is the voice of a woman, or it's a reproduction of a voice of a woman, and does that make a difference?
So you can listen to auto-tune?
Okay. So that becomes an issue.
Like a computer GPS,
okay.
like what?
Right. Well, the same issue arises with listening to a chauffeur through a microphone. Okay. Or listening to
machine. It's a person just transmitted.
Or the question. I mean, when I say blowing shofar over the microphone, that becomes an issue. But you sit there and say, well, maybe you have a problem with using a microphone over Shabbos. Although the fact is that there was big machlokas to one upon using a microphone.
A live concert,
okay.
Or whatever.
Or let's say hearing Megillah. Well, you have to hear Megillah. Can you hear Megillah through a microphone? Okay, but the fact is that's one of the issues of Kol B'Isha. One of the other issues with Kol B'Isha is what exactly are the facts. Okay, so one of the classic distinctions that is mentioned is whether it's shirim of Sheva V'Hodah. When you have women at a Shabbos table, do they sing Zmiros or not? Okay, so a lot of families, the women sing Zmiros. Now how can they sing Zmiros? Right, if Kol B'Isha is a problem, how can they sing Zmiros? So the truth is that they say, well, there's arguments that's only an individual singing is a problem. If you have a group singing, it's not a problem. Other people say that singing does not apply to songs of Sheva V'Hodah, to Kodesh Baruch Hu. It only applies to love songs. The Kol B'Isha everyone is talking about when they're singing love songs.
Is that a prevalent?
That's a various opinions, but this is an example that when you look at a statement, you break it down and say, what are the facts behind that statement?
Well, Miriam sang Azar here.
Yeah, but on the other hand, Miriam sang by herself, and then there's other people pointed out that Miriam took the musical instruments, and some people say the reason Miriam could sing was because she took the musical instruments, because it says over there she took musical instruments and sang. Let me think of another example. I want to think of another example that has more of a neutral side to this, where the facts are a lot of the facts are.
What's the main importance of having Kol Isha?
Well, that becomes the issue. The question is what's the actual halachic definition, and what's the actual halachic principle, and what are the facts? Like, let me think of another example. Where I can really break down the nature of the halacha. See, I want to get an example where you really see what the question emerges on your question of what really is the halachic principle. Okay. Let me think for a sec. I'm blanking on a lot of things. Let me think. Let me give you an example. Okay? It's an interesting example from Kibbutz Rabbi. Okay? There's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch that says you can't sit in your father's seat. Right? A seat that is miyuchad to your father you can't sit in. Right? Without his rishus. Okay. There was a thing in Poland, I guess it was Poland or Lithuania, where in the shul there was the seat that represented the family. And when that seat was occupied, it meant that the family was present. And the head of the family would sit in this seat. So in this shul, okay, there was a seat, and there was a seat that was designated as representative of the mishpacha, and the head of the family would sit there and represent that the mishpacha is represented in shul. So the case arises, what happens if a father who's the head of the family happens to be ill one Shabbos, okay, and he's not going to be able to sit in his seat? What should you do? Okay? So the Aruch HaShulchan paskins that in that case the son has an obligation to sit in his father's seat.
Right.
Okay? In other words, no question about it. That seat, which is usually miyuchad to the father, in that situation the son has to sit in that seat.
That's
Why?
not miyuchad to the father.
It's miyuchad to the father. The father's the one who normally sits there. It's a seat that normally everyone understands to be his father's seat. Normally he shouldn't be sitting in that seat, but in the case when the father can't make it to shul and the seat would otherwise be empty, it would be a bizayon for the mishpacha not to have the seat occupied. Therefore the son should sit in this seat. It's a greater covet to the father to sit in the seat than to not sit in the seat.
Like
what's the
situation?
So what's the Aruch HaShulchan really saying?
Sitting in your father's seat type of thing.
The Aruch HaShulchan is saying, listen, on the surface, balabatish, you're going to say the issue is just sitting in your father's seat, and you shouldn't sit in your father's seat. That's what you think the issue is.
Yeah.
No. That's not the way the issue should be understood. What's the halacha?
It's covered.
Halacha is showing kavod.
Yeah.
In normal situations, you take kavod and you apply it to facts. In normal situations, the facts are the way of showing kavod is not sitting in your father's seat. Okay, good. But in this situation, given the facts that are different, it actually turns out that what's really kavod? Sitting in your father's seat. Therefore, the law is, in that case, you should sit in your father's seat. Okay? Now, this is a perfect example of how halacha really works. Halacha is the underlying principles, meaning the facts, and yielding a conclusion. Now, where do you usually find disagreements then? Well, there's disagreements on what the underlying principles are. Okay, and then you have machlokas rishonim, machorim on what the underlying principles are. And therefore, if you have a disagreement what the underlying principles are, then you're going to yield, and you're going to have a problem in terms of what the final. You're going to have an issue in terms of what the reason for what the conclusion is going to be. Okay, so one issue is when you look at machlokas and halacha is to find those disagreements and underlying principles. Then there's issues in terms of facts. Is there agreement on the facts? Is there a joint understanding of the facts? Let me give you another example, which is a little bit more controversial. Women learning Gemara, right? So
It's become not really anymore controversial.
it is still controversial. The Haredi world still doesn't live in Gemara.
Yeah.
Okay, Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik, and Lubavitcher Rebbe, but Rabbi Yoshe Ber really was very adamant, is that there's any of women learning Gemara. Women should learn Gemara. Yeah, they should know it. Other Rabbanim say no. Now, what are the other Rabbanim based on? Based on the Shulchan Aruch, is based on the Rambam. The Rambam says you shouldn't teach women Torah Shmuel Peh, and that's a shita in the Mishnah it's a Mishnah in where is it now? I forget it. It's a shita in the Mishnah, and we paskin that we paskin like Rabbi Eliezer that we shouldn't teach women, especially the Rambam says Torah Shabbal Peh. Okay, and that's the way it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch.
That means they can't paskin anything ever.
What?
That means they wouldn't be able to know anything ever.
Right. Okay. So the point is though, is that what Rabbi Yoshe doesn't know the Meferish of Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yoshe doesn't know the Meferish of Rambam.
No.
Right? Rabbi Yoshe turns around and says, yeah, now we should teach women Gemara. So the fact is what do you think the difference is? So the world may say it's a thing women should learn Gemara. Okay. I would think that Rabbi Yoshe held like this: that if you look at the statement of Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah, when it says it's Kilulim the Taflos, and also you look at a lot of Rishonim, like for sure Rashi's daughters knew Gemara. There are a lot of cases of women who knew Gemara. There's an interesting book out by a woman by the name of Shoshana Zolti called All My What?
How would they learn? How they?
Yeah, so she brings out this book of All My Children Shall Be Learned. It's her book, and she brings down, for example, that the Maral of Prague's works were all edited by his wife. His wife went over all his stuff, and she said, it's brought down in the book, she said that you have to excuse her husband. He did make a few mistakes in quotes, right? But you have to excuse him because he was tired. He was involved so much in the ideas and so forth and so forth. The thing that gets me is that means that his wife knew enough Torah to be able to say, here, these are yeah. So okay. Anyways, when Rashi started learning Gemara, there's a lot of cases when we learn Gemara. So the point is how do you have to understand it?
How so I would think, even according to that shit, how would women exist in a kitchen?
So the fact of the matter is, so that's actually a question that's brought down. No, you have to. The fact of the matter is, there is a shita. There's actually a shita. I think in the Drisha, in the preacher of the Drisha, I forget on the tour. We make a distinction of whether women learning halacha or agadata. There is another shita that says that we can't teach women is a gadita, but for sure they have to learn hilchasa because they have to know how to live as Jews. So they have to know hilchasa. Okay, but anyways, the point is though, is the way I understand Rabbi Yoshe is very simple. And if you look at it, is that the issue is not gender women. That's not the issue. The issue is should you be teaching Gemara to people who can't really put in the time, effort to really understand it and gain a knowledge of it. Why? Because a little bit of information in the hands of an individual could be a problem. So if you look at that Gemara that Mishnah brought down, is that the example they give of women learning is because they're saying that a little bit of knowledge can cause problems.
Rabbi, you have people go to Baljiva Yeshiva.
Exactly. So the point is,
they're like for a year.
So the point is that the question that exists is should you be learning? Should you be teaching? And actually, the Gemara doesn't talk about learning. The Mishnah actually talks about teaching. Should you be teaching to people who will not commit to really gaining a knowledge of a sufficient knowledge of the system?
So don't teach children until they reach an age where they can commit.
Or you gotta be sure that, or that you're gonna expect them that they're gonna be able to put in the time that they get a base knowledge that
go to share like what is.
Well, I mean you have to. Okay. So the way I understand it is that with you have the same problem with men.
Right.
Who's to say that men will be willing to put in the time that's necessary to gain a sufficient knowledge of the information so that it won't be problematic if they only have an insufficient knowledge. I mean, the problem being that a little bit of knowledge could cause more troubles. And by the way, you see this. The fact is that someone who really doesn't know anything, that person will be very deferential. I have to ask the rabbi, I got to find what to do, and so forth and so forth. The guy who knows a little bit, right, and thinks he knows everything, he's more problem. I'll give you another example of this. I was once told by people who were involved in Eshet Torah, right, that when they were trying to pick up people at the wall, they'd go over to people, oh, do you want to come yeshiva, learn a little bit, and so forth and so forth. The minute they found out that the guy went to Hebrew school, to regular afternoon Hebrew school, they lost interest. Why? Because a little bit of knowledge caused bigger problems. Yeah. Better to pick up someone who said, I never went to Hebrew school, I have no idea, I totally don't know anything about Judaism, because this guy doesn't think he knows something. But you try to talk to someone who actually thinks they know something when they don't, that's a bigger problem.
Right.
Okay, so there are people who understand this idea of not teaching women in the same context. Really, for men, you have the same problem. If a man is not willing to put in the time learning, if a man's not willing to put in the time, and the fact of the matter is, do you have a concern that this guy will get a little bit of knowledge and that will cause more tzuras? Yes, but what can you do? He still has a chiyuv of learning.
Right.
He still has a mitzvah Talmud Torah. Therefore, with men, you're stuck. Okay? It's the same way, by the way, in understanding something by counting Sfiras HaOmer. Okay? There's an argument in Sfiras HaOmer. For example, when you say, on the first day, you say a bracha, and you count, right? What about if it's you forget on the 38th day, so you no longer say a bracha, right? What about all the brachas you made beforehand? So, to some shitas, in Hachinami, it's a bracha l'vatal. Every time that you said a bracha before, it's a bracha l'vatal. But what can you do? You have to take that gamble.
So what?
Because you have a chiyuv of counting according to those shitas. You got to count, so forth and so forth, and hopefully you won't. And hopefully you remember counting. And if you forget, it might be that all the brachas you made was a bracha l'vatal. However, what about a woman who wants to count? Okay, so it's brought down that there's a whole issue of whether women who count Omer should do so with a bracha. So the fact of it is, I heard that, for example, I think I heard that the stipler, the stipler's son, that his daughter, or the wife, anyways, that women in that family count Omer with a bracha. So it's not so simple you can't count Omer with a bracha, but it's brought down that women shouldn't count Omer with a bracha by other people. Why? Because what happens if they forget? So if they forget, it would turn out that their brachas to count, because we hold like Ashkenazim that a woman can make a bracha even though it's mitzvah sheish zman grama, but still retroactively, if she forgets, according to certain shittas, it would be a bracha l'vatal.
Girls in like old Pana.
I don't know. When my daughters were counting Omer for a few years, and what I used to make up with them is that they would say a bracha. If they counted every day, they'd say a bracha on the 49th day, because then it would no longer be an issue of a bracha l'vatal, because the final bracha would be
so they don't really say on that.
So why wouldn't we do that?
Right, what?
Why wouldn't we do that?
Because we are the chiyuv. That's why I'm comparing it to the limud Torah thing. Because we have a chiyuv to count. A woman doesn't have a chiyuv to.
Do we not? Yeah, I mean, not yet right? Chiyuv if we just count without a bracha.
Yes, you are. But the fact of the matter is that, but according to the sheet, does it say you should say bracha every day? Then that's part of the mitzvah. So therefore, what I'm saying is the men. What I'm saying is that men have to take that gamble. Women don't have to take that gamble. That's the same thing I'm trying to say with limud Torah. Limud Torah, yeah, it's right that a man who only learns a little bit of Torah, it could be a big problem, but a man has a chiyuv in Torah. But women don't have a chiyuv, therefore you don't want to get them learning unless you know for sure that they're going to have put in the proper efforts. Rashi, who knew his daughters and knew what he would do with his daughters and so forth and so forth, he wasn't worried about his daughters not meeting a basic standard of knowing the material. So the point is, though, so what's the argument? So what I believe now the argument of let's say someone like Rabbi Soloveitchik is that given today that women are much more involved in study and so forth and so forth,
they're academic,
and therefore we can assume that women will meet a minimum standard of knowledge, that their knowledge doesn't have to be problematic. So that's an example of what I mean. What I'm trying to say, though, is
that's universal, because there's the whole Beis Yaakov system.
Right, but the fact of the matter is that Yesh Bris, that also applies to Torah Sheba'al Peh. It specifically applies to Torah Sheba'al Peh. Beis Yaakov system was another argument, also because it didn't apply to Torah Sheba'al Peh. But Yesh Bris is saying that the problem of women learning Gemara is because they may not put enough. They may not be able to have a minimum standard of education, and less than a minimum standard of education could be a problem. But that's not because that's a gender problem.
Right.
That's because of sociological reasons, so forth. So for today, that we don't have to make this gender distinction, and therefore it's a good thing to teach women.
We also have art school.
Okay.
Who decides what the minimum is?
Right.
Those are all additional questions. But the point is, I'm just pointing out to you that the distinction, even though the Shulchan Aruch says don't teach women Gemara, Rabbi wasn't disagreeing. He was saying this is what the legal principle is. Don't teach. I would say, I'm projecting. He doesn't say this. That don't teach people who will not be committed to who will not have the ability or commitment to learning a base level of education. Okay? Women aren't that there. So what I'm trying to say, though, is, what I'm trying to point out is this is really the way Halacha works. Halacha is a connection between the underlying legal principles.
Right.
You might have machlokas among people what those underlying legal principles, meaning facts, and then coming up with a conclusion. And therefore, if the facts change, the conclusions are going to change. And that's a fundamental aspect of Halacha. People thinking that the Halacha is following the Shulchan Aruch the way it was written in 1500 and saying this is exactly the law. The fact is, everyone who understands the real principles of Halacha know that if the facts change, the law changes. Right, but the legal principles stay the same.
But there are still, if the legal principle is still the same, then couldn't you then look at the situation and be like, okay, it doesn't change because if the rationale that's guiding your initial judgment is based on not the judicial legislation, but not the judicial process, but more the legislative process.
But we don't have a legislative process anymore. We don't have a legislative process.
Well, you just said that, like Rabbi Yoshe Ber.
That's judicial. It's judicial.
So he just had a different judicial idea than Rambam?
No, he basically said what the Rambam meant. In other words, what you're saying is that the statement of the Rambam is the result of the principles meeting the facts leading to this conclusion.
Right.
Okay? Okay? So the Rambam had a certain understanding of the facts, he has a certain understanding of the judicial principle.
Okay.
Okay? Now, applying that same judicial principle, but perceiving the facts to be different, will lead to a different conclusion, which the Rambam would also make today. The Rambam's statement was in the Rambam's statement was made in 1290. It was the legal principles meaning certain facts leading to a conclusion.
Okay.
Okay? If the facts change, the conclusion is going to change, and the Rambam himself would be the first to say that. He'd say the major issue is the legal principles. That's what we agree. That's the thing that doesn't change. That's legal principles from Har Sinai. Or Zexeris Rabbanan, or whatever. Those are legal principles. It meets the facts and leads to conclusion. The point is that conclusion, right, will change based upon the facts. And even the Rambam would say that the law is different today, because his major point was, here's the legal principles, and I made my conclusion based upon these facts. But if the facts are different, the conclusion's different.
So the judicial process that people have isn't binding.
No, the judicial process, what's binding is...
The judicial outcome.
Right, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. That when the Shulchan Aruch makes a statement, it's making a statement based upon certain legal principles, certain facts. Now, where do you see issues in Halacha? Disagreements? It might be that two Rabbanim have different understanding of the legal principles. That's one issue.
Yes.
And therefore, two Rabbanim with different understandings of legal principles will yield different conclusions because they disagree with legal principles. So Rashi and Tosfos, right? A lot. Rambam and Rabbi, they would disagree. In other words, one says, this is the legal principle. The other person says this is the legal principle.
But then, like Rav Soloveitchik, is he saying so?
Rav Soloveitchik is saying, what I believe Rav Soloveitchik is saying is this is the legal principle of the Rambam.
He's agreeing with the Rambam.
He's agreeing with the Rambam.
But let's say he said, like, would he ever say that
He's not going to disagree. He wouldn't disagree with the Rambam because the Rambam is a Rishon.
But who would disagree with Rambam then?
The Rabbi. Right? Tosfos could disagree with the Rambam. Now, in our world today, for example, let me give you the other example.
Okay.
Big example from our world today. Okay? Give an example from a Drabonin. Okay? There are certain people who only drink Chol Yisrael, right? Most people think of Chol Yisrael as a chumrah or whatever, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But the fact is there are shittas who hold that Chol Yisrael is a chiyuv. You can't drink milk that's not Chol Yisrael. Why? And the truth of the matter is that's actually the halacha. There's a Gzeira D'Rabbanan that says you can only drink Chol Yisrael. Okay, that's a Gzeira D'Rabbanan. Okay? The fact of the matter is, there's no heter to drink anything that's not Chol Yisrael. Okay? That's clear. The mistake that most people don't understand is Ramosha basically said, who's noted as saying you can drink any milk in North America. You can't do so in Europe because the standards in Europe are a little bit different, but the reason you can drink milk in North America is because he really holds, okay, that all milk is Chalav Yisrael.
I thought he was the thing everyone always says is that he was actually giving a heter for like when you're in a situation where you can't have.
Yeah, that's nice arguments. But the fact of the matter is he's giving a heter. What's his reason for giving a heter? The point of the matter is that's already going beyond the law or whatever. The point of the matter is that when you say heter, what he was really doing though, what was the nature of that heter? Yeah. The nature of that heter, what you want to call heter, is basically he says all milk is Chalav Yisrael.
At all times?
At all times. You go into a store, it's every quart of milk in that store, every quart of milk in the store you go into, according to Ramosha, is Chalav Yisrael.
What if you make
now, wait a sec. What does Ramosha mean by that? What's the definition of Chalav Yisrael? Okay, so watch this. You have to understand the legal principles here.
Yeah.
Chalav Yisrael is a Gzeira D'Rabbanan that says that milk has to be supervised. Okay? Okay? In other words, you have to make sure that the milk is 100% cow's milk. Okay? And the way you do that is through hashgacha. So therefore you have to have a Jew on the premises, and then it gets the issue the Jew has to be Damer in the milking, but the Jew has to be on the premises to ensure what Chazal were saying is that you have to ensure that milk is 100% cow's milk. Okay. Now, the point is how do you ensure that? So it's Chazal says you have to have a Jew on the premises at the milking, whatever. What Ramosha says is that what you have to do is you have to meet the legal requirements of ensuring that the milk is 100% cow's milk. So he says it's a non-sahadi. A non-sahadi is a guaranteed 100% fact that's not a question based upon the circumstances. What does that mean? Ramosha says that nowadays, because there's government inspectors of the milk, okay, and that governmental inspection of the milk ensures that it's all cow's milk because the penalties for not abiding to it are major and the guy will go out of business. Therefore he says it's a non-sahadi that milk is going to be 100% cow's milk. What Ramosha is really saying is that Chazal, when it says you have to have a mashgiach, all Chazal is really saying is you have to take steps to ensure that it's 100% cow's milk.
Right.
If you have a non-sahadi that the government will ensure that there's 100% cow's milk, that meets Chazal's requirements.
Why wouldn't a vegan hechsher be valid?
because it's not by the government.
It's not by the government.
It doesn't have the same type of penalties.
Right.
Okay, so Ramosha's argument is that it's not that. Of course, you need Chal Yisrael, what we call Chal Yisrael. For sure, right? You have to meet the Gzera D'Rabbanan of milk being supervised. He holds that milk supervised by government meets the standards of Chazal set. Okay? Other people disagree.
So that means milk, regular Chalav stop milk, is Chal Yisrael milk. And anyone who tells you that...
According to Ramosha, now, there's other definitions of Chal Yisrael. There's a more Kabbalistic definition of Chal Yisrael, having a Jew on the premises. Things like that. I'm not getting into those. I'm saying that other people say that's not enough of a standard. The Chazal demanded...
Right.
In other words, what's the argument? The argument is in the legal principle. Other people are saying no. Chazal demanded that there be a Jew on the premises. Ramosha basically held that Chazal demanded that you ensure that it is 100% cow's milk. The point is that the machlokas in legal principles, okay, leading to a conclusion that's a disagreement of whether what we call chav stam is acceptable to drink or not. But the bottom line is that it comes down to machlokas in the legal principle of what Chazal was actually geyser. Now, so what I'm trying to point out to you is that conclusions are a result of the mixture of legal principles and the facts. We have machlokas based upon disagreements in legal principles. But we also have changes in conclusions based upon the facts. That's the example the Aruch Shulchan gave of sitting in your father's seat. Facts are different. In that case, you sit in your father's seat. And the fact is, that's where you get into a lot of other conclusions. The truth is, there are certain statements in Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says something, and he's making a statement based upon certain facts. Those facts are different. I'll give you an example of that. Let me give you an example of that. Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah say, as long as you use soap, you can wash milchik and fleishik dishes together. As long as you use soap. That's the Meferish of Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah is maskim.
In the same sink?
What?
In the same sink?
In the same sink. You can wash them together.
You
can wash milchik and fleishik dishes together as long as you use soap. Okay, so if you put soap in, you can wash milchik and fleishik dishes together. That's Meferish of Shulchan Aruch. Okay, the no say Kalim, I think both the Shach and Taz, but I think for sure the Shach basically say no. What was the argument of the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah? Is that the soap makes everything no sin tam of gam, right? It makes everything have a bad pagam, and therefore anything that happens in the washing of the things, you never you never have that the dishes ever are bulea, and never take in a usher taste because everything is no sin tam of gam because of the soap.
Question: so why is it that people nowadays have two dishwashers?
Because the Shach says you can't rely upon this. Because the Shach disagreed. The Shach basically said that soap is not no sin tam of gam. He basically said no. This is he disagreed. He said that soap does not allow you to wash. It's not enough of a reason of a no sin tam. It's not enough of a substance that's no sin tam of gum to allow you to what milk and flakes.
So then the people who say that, then they'll say our soap nowadays is 10 times stronger.
So there actually are people nowadays. I heard one person says, yeah, the Shach was talking now. Nowadays, our soap is so much stronger that we can actually go back to the actual halacha of the Shulchan Aruch.
That's what my brother's Shiva told me.
Okay.
What?
Nowadays, my brother's Shiva spoke.
It's not really.
So the fact is, so the point is, it's all a matter of principles. Okay.
As a matter of practical, it really doesn't affect anything because you shouldn't be having those things together. You shouldn't be having dirty dishes of both at the same time.
Why?
Well, because I eat my meat and then I wash the dishes.
So
and
that's
6 hours later I eat the.
So that's you.
Ever heard of laziness?
That's you.
Yeah, it shouldn't apply.
You know,
to
the truth of the matter is nowadays we're more machmir. What we do in a kosher kitchen is way beyond the law, but that's the minhag Yisrael and so forth.
Well, so nowadays we have more money we could spend to build a double sink kitchen. What do they do in Europe when they have one?
So the fact is that all these issues get into this. All gets into this issue of the relationship between the facts and the principles. Okay, we have machlokas because of disagreements in the principles, and then the big thing about halacha though is halacha must connect to the facts, and therefore even a statement found in a code has to be understood. What are the facts that are in that code? Okay, so the point is though, that's why the underlying principles are so significant in halacha. Where you get into disagreements nowadays is a lot of things about people saying who are concerned about any type of movement because maybe it's not right, you should follow a more stringent opinion, and other people say no, that's what halacha really is all about. Okay, so we'll go on from here next time.